episode of the Sunic podcast. Today I have a super special guest, and I say that quite often, but I know this one is going to make one of my best friends so jealous, which makes me infinitely happy. Christian Roro is here joining me today. Christian is a representative manager of Trampled by Turtles, has a long history of being in the music industry, and we're going to get into that today. But Christian, I just want to say, first, thank you so much for joining the show.
Hey man, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, I will keep digging at my buddy Ethan. Probably this whole episode. He is huge fan. I did not tell him that this is happening, so when the episode airs is when he's gonna figure out. I figured, hey, let's have some fun, surprise him, and
As you
everything.
should.
But
Keep digging at your friends. That's what friends are for.
Exactly. We like to have fun around here. But Christian, I would love to, I want to get to know you too, as well as the listening audience here. Just a little bit of background to start. Where are you from? What was your upbringing like? And I imagine music somehow tied into all that. But I'll let you tell us.
Yeah, so I grew up in New Jersey. I'm from a town called Glen Rock, which is right outside New York City. So New York's always been sort of in my life, and just like music's always been in my life. I mean, I've been obsessed with it since I was a little kid, and I wound up, growing up outside the city, and then I wound up going to college in New York City at NYU, and I went to school for journalism thinking I wanted to be a writer. I always sort of enjoyed that. And as I was kind of going through the program, I was just slowly kind of just getting turned off to journalism. But all along, not even consciously, but all along my studies, I was just interning at tons of places, and they all happened to be music business internships. I didn't even realize music business was a thing, but I just happened to I would do like 4 or 5 internships at a time through various things that all happened to be circled around music. And then my senior year, I got a internship, kind of like a glorified internship for a large record distributor called BMG at the time. This is like mid to late 90s. This is like 97. And I had I got paid. I had a small stipend for a college student was pretty good, but I had like responsibilities and duties. And then that was my first sort of paid gig in the music industry. And then I got hired right after I graduated by that company. And I worked on the distribution side of the record business. And this is like late 90s. So this is peak sort of Britney Spears, Backstreet Boys, just the CDs were selling for like $18 a pop or almost $20 a pop. So the industry was just flush with cash right before Napster and all that stuff came and broke it down. So that's how I sort of cut my teeth in the industry, was just on the record company side of things. Super removed from artists though. I was I was young, and I was just a cog in the machine of this, massive global sort of company. But I would just been in the music business since then. And I stayed there about 7 years. And then I wound up moving down to Nashville in my late 20s and started working for 30 Tigers then. And 30 Tigers was a small distribution company, but on a much smaller level than BMG was at that time. But it was basically a company where artists would retain ownership, as opposed to a traditional record deal where you sign away your rights. The artist would retain ownership of their masters, and then 30 Tigers would act as a label services. They would sort of act as their team. And it was, so I kind of started working there. And then I got into management while I was down there and working at 30 Tigers.
Before we stick with the music, because that's what I want to dig deep into, but the journalism piece actually is interesting to me. That I also went to college for journalism at first, and just kind of, I don't know, fell out of care for it because of the way that newspapers were going, and things like that, I guess. But I still love to write. Do you still love to write? Do you get to write?
I don't do it, and that's kind of just lazy on my part. I still enjoy it. I still like diaries type stuff, and I felt like I was always pretty good at it. But yeah, the actual journalistic side of it sort of turned me off. But I don't write anymore, and I've been thinking about recently sort of trying to pick it up again. But sometimes at the end of the day, after a long day of work, and it's just like I just don't feel like typing more, you know what I mean? Like for
Yeah,
professional stuff. So I probably need to turn that attitude around a little bit because I do miss it to some degree. But
sure.
yeah, no, I definitely got, journalism. I was young, I didn't. I thought that's sort of what I wanted to do because I did it sort of enjoy writing, but I slowly just got turned off by just the who, what, when, why, and how. You just get so like desensitized to like, when we were like learning
Yeah,
just journalism basic stuff, it's like, professors would sort of give like, okay, here's all the details of this bus crash, write about this sort of, write about this. And after a while, you just get really desensitized to the details of all of that. And I was just like, I don't know if this is really for me. It just seems just a little too removed. I don't know if that's the right word, but
sure.
and then I was like, oh, maybe I'll just focus on like feature stuff and music journalism stuff. And then after a while, I just got really turned off to that because I don't know, there's just such like pretentiousness in that world, I feel. And at the like I don't think personally I would buy something or not buy something based on a review of some sort of someone else's opinion, So I kind of just got turned
Yeah,
off to that really young. So I was like, I don't really want to do that. That's not super interesting to me. And then just this
yeah,
music business thing just kind of like unknowingly
yeah.
kind of just stepped into that. Didn't realize what I was doing all along. So it wound up working out.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think you're a lot like me in the sense where it's kind of like when you want to write, you just want to have that creative outlet and not have so many restrictions per se or anything like that. So if you haven't if you don't follow any writers on this app or if you never heard of it, it's called Substack. I
Yeah.
would definitely take a look into that. And I use it like for my personal writing because it's just like whenever something pops up that I want to write about, I write about it. And, there's like no pressure or anything. You can get free subscribers, and whatnot. If you're really good at it, you can get people to pay for your work. But, that might be something if you're interested in, diving down that path in the future to look into. But let's go back to the music. So, starting on the distribution side, and then, like you said, you obviously move on to the people management side. Like, was that the goal all along? Did that just happen because of your work ethic and the people that you connected with?
I gotta say, like, I never things wound up working out well, but I never really had a master plan. I never really had like a goal that this is where I was going to end up. I mean, I've been thankfully presented opportunities and I think I just sort of seized it, but it was never like a conscious sort of thing that I ever actually pursued. And coming out of that massive distribution system where I was so far removed from managers and artists, really, like I didn't even know what managers did or what that even was. I was always on the record company side of things. And then how I got into management, when I was at 30 Tigers and I was working on the distribution side, I moved to Nashville and I, knew friends down there. Some friends of friends brought me to see some friends of theirs from Atlanta, a band from Atlanta that came into town to play. And I was just so blown away by this band, and they played, I don't know if it was the Five Spot or just, the Basement, something small in Nashville. Then at the time, this is like 2007, I think. And I was just so blown away by this band and I didn't know what to do with my feelings. And then a friend was like, well, why don't you manage them? And I was like, what's that? I didn't really quite know what that was. And then I sort of there were some other managers at 30 Tigers at the time. So I kind of just started asking them about that. I got to sort of got an idea of what that is. And then I convinced this band to let me manage them. And then I just kind of just jumped in and just started to, just send cold call emails and cold calls and just try and just find opportunities and just organize stuff. And then I started enjoying it. I started getting good at it. Not like that brought any great success to that band or myself, but I was making some progress. And then the president of our company, David Macias, he was managing a couple artists at the time, and he sort of brought me in on those projects. And then, so I further started just honing in skills that way. And then it just kind of kept snowballing from there. So so that's kind of, it was never a conscious thing to get into management, but it just kind of like happened.
Yeah, you have the skill set, might as well go for it.
I don't know if it's a
So
skill set. I mean, like, there's these music business kids that like they go to college for this stuff. I didn't even know NYU did have a music business program, but I didn't even know that was a thing, that was even
right.
available to me. And these music business kids can probably run circles around me with just specifics of music business. admin or whatever. But I think with management, it's like it's sink or swim. You figure it out. You're gonna be good at it or not. You know, you can't be taught it. You know, it's like there's just a lot of trial and error. You're gonna it's gonna sort itself out who can survive. And it's hard. It's a hard gig. You know, it's starting out is hard because there's no money. Even when some money does start coming in, it's just hard to maintain. Like it's just crazy. You know, sometimes I
Sure.
think about it and it's like, what the hell am I doing?
Well, it seems like you're having fun though. It's
I love it.
worth
Yeah,
it, you
I'm
know.
saying
Yeah.
that in jest, but it's pretty daunting if you kind of stop and think about it. It's like, wow.
Yeah, absolutely. So bring me back, you talked about earlier music just being such an instrumental part of your life. Like what were growing up, some of those influences, bands, individual artists, things like that. And are you still connected to that type of music these days?
My
Like from a
earliest,
fan standpoint?
yeah, definitely. My earliest musical memories. So my parents are European. My father was there. I'm Polish. My parents are both Polish, but my father was born and raised in France. But it was just like a Polish family, just born and raised in France. I'm not French at all, but he was always obsessed with music, and his record collection was massive. And like my earliest musical memories were ABBA and this group called Boney M. Both of those, I mean, those ABBA's massive globally. Boney M were
Yeah.
massive in Europe at the time in the late 70s. They were this sort of like Jamaican disco band out of Germany, but they were huge there. They'd be like a stadium act, and ABBA was, especially massive in Europe. So they had very European taste. They had just, moved to the States in the early 70s, but they kept their sort of Euro vibes, and they would play those records. And so those were my earliest musical memories, and just the harmonies and just the beats and all of that. So, I still love those bands. Those are my earliest favorites. And then right after that, like I just like Kiss kind of came into my radar. Like before even like musically I really got what they were, but just like the monster aspect of them. And again, I was young. This is probably like 1980 or something. I was like 4 years old, but I just remember early memories of just seeing Kiss and being kind of terrified, but seeing them with these guitars and this aggressive sort of vibe. And it's like, what is this? So I always kind of credit like my earliest musical influences would be like ABBA and Kiss. And it's just kind of like the pop sensibilities of ABBA, but sort of like the monster and the masquerade and the aggression of something like Kiss was at that time. Um, and then it just kind of kept going from there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Are you still, fans of that type of music then? Like that hasn't changed, or has your musical taste changed like since you got into the music industry?
I think I love all music. There's something in every genre that I love, but I mean, at heart, I'm a heavy metal kid. That's something that's definitely sort of stayed. So it's kind of funny. I've never worked with a heavy metal band. I've worked with all kinds of genres, uh, very far removed from metal. But I think that's my sort of home. Like so that's sort of there. And I think part of that too, because I don't know anybody in the hard rock heavy metal sort of world, like I'm not, it's still kind of like fun for me. I'm not deconstructing. Like when I'm seeing a band, they're like, I don't know anybody. I don't know their booking agents. I don't think about their marketing plans. You know what I mean? Like the
Yeah.
curtain's not pulled back there. So it's still very sort of special for me. And that's not to say that, genres or bands where I do know the agents where that sort of affects that. I still, I love music. I'm obsessed with music, but there's just something that I've loved from an early age of just, Kiss and Motley Crue. And that those are my earliest sort of tastes or exposure in that sort of world that just sort of stuck. And there's something that I'll just always has a special place in my heart there.
Yeah, that innocence is still alive. It feels like with that type of music specifically. Like,
Yeah, I don't know if Motley Crue is really, especially in the early 80s, Motley Crue is that innocent per se, but yeah, but in a sense.
fair enough. Okay, so tell me then, how do you get connected to Trampled? Like, what's that journey to getting introduced to that band and eventually becoming somebody who represents them?
So this is like 2009. By that point, I had been managing for maybe like a year or so. year, maybe almost 2 years by that point. But I was co-managing this bass player, singer songwriter from Memphis called Amy Levere, and I was doing that with our president David. And we were I was up in New York with her. We were doing the Conan O'Brien show at the time, and there was a
Nice.
guy that I befriended. He was working at this website Jambase at the time, and I knew he was a fan of Amy's, so I invited him to whatever little after party that we were doing after we played COVID or something. He kind of came down to hang, and afterwards we were walking to the subway, and he's like, "Hey, so I've been talking to this bluegrass band out of Minnesota called Trampled, and they got a little thing going, and you have a day job, I have a day job. Would you be interested in co-managing these guys?" And I'll be honest, I'm not really a bluegrass guy, but I sort of just went home and I looked at I listened to their MySpace page, and what came out was the song Empire, and it just broke my heart. And I was like, and it wasn't the bluegrass that I was expecting it to be. And I was like, like yes, I get this. Like I love this, and I think I can um, I think I can bring something here. So then we flew out and we hung with them, and then we started working together, and we started just co-managing them, and didn't really, we also kind of went into that a bit blindly, didn't really sort of realize what a co-managing situation is or anything like that. We just started doing it, and we started having success with those guys. And then after a while, yeah, we started just slowly getting some success with them. And then they're from Minnesota, and they were friends with this band Low, old school indie rock band, and they told us about them. They were looking for management, so then we started working with those guys, and then we're having some success with those guys as well. And then from there, just working around Minnesota, we just got to know the promoters, the radio there, and also just learn the sort of, I mean, is that, Prince is from there, it's like, the replacements from there, but you really just kind of start learning the market and the rich Minnesota musical history that's there. And you sort of working in that scene, you sort of get it. Like Minnesota people love their own, and there's such a strong scene there because they had the Current supports local bands, and people go out and support the local bands. It's not just about national acts that come in. So when there were cool bands popping around town, we would be the first to be tipped off about it. So like we were tipped off about Lizzo early on, and we were tipped off about Hippocampus early on. We started working with those guys that we were their first managers too. So, and then from there, things just sort of blossomed with some other acts too. Jeff and I stopped working together around 2016, and then I've been with Trampled just as the sole manager since then.
It seems like there's like a link of integrity, if you will, into the sense that for you to manage a band is more than just like, hey, I'm going to be your manager. Like you took some time, like with the example of Trampled, you said, you went on their MySpace page and listened to their music and everything, and it was like, oh, okay, I like this music, I can get into this and everything. Like, is that important to you to like actually enjoy what it is that you're representing?
I definitely have to enjoy what it is, but the most important thing to me in management is I have to like and respect the people. I have to have a vibe with the person, and I have to feel there's a connection in there. If that's not there, then it's hard for me to do anything else. And my early years in the music industry, where I was working for this massive distributor, where I had to go into Tower Records in the Village and promote our latest releases, where I would have to promote the new Britney Spears, Whitney Houston, David Gray, Dave Matthews, some baby band. I had to do all of this stuff. I had to promote it all sort of equally, whether or not I liked the stuff or not, whether or not I went home and was obsessed with whatever particular record, I still had to sort of serve as its promoter there at that time. You know what I mean? So I learned to sort of promote stuff that I'm not necessarily, I don't like live and breathe it. You know what I mean? It's not to say I don't like it and I don't respect it or see its value, but I think just having that sort of early education in music, that promoting music that way, spilling into management. Of course, I have to love the stuff I'm working with, but honestly, it's really more about the people, and then from there I can kind of work anything.
Yeah, that's very cool. Very cool. So, if you had to break this down for my 2.5-year-old daughter in a very simplistic way, what would you say, being a long tenure now as representative of Trampled, like, what is it that you are trying to accomplish as their manager, as their representation?
With Trampled, we just celebrated 20 years, 20-year anniversary just last week, actually. I've been with them 14 years. So, I mean, it's hard to keep a band together for 5 years, 10 years. I mean, 20 years, it's incredible. And especially like with a band like Trampled, who it's not a household name, definitely have their successes and definitely have their hardcore base, but it's still not a household name if you'd say it to, some rando on the street. So I think for Trampled, I mean, first of all, it's what do they want? Helping them achieve their goals and what they sort of want, helping them maintain their business, and helping advising them on how to navigate the music industry, which changes. I mean, hell, I've been with them 14 years. The amount of changes that we've sort of seen in that time, just with just various social media platforms and the way people are consuming music. So you're the sort of eyes and ears on the ground for just how the music industry is changing. So it's really just helping them navigate the waters and for the next 20 years, they let them focus on what they do best, and that's performing shows, writing music, making great records. And then it's my job to figure out how we get it to the people, and run a successful business.
So it seems like there's a really cool synergy that's needed to like have a successful partnership then, right? To for them to trust you to be the person who can block all that extra noise and just allow them to, like you said, be the artist, write the music, put it together and everything. And then for you to find the venues for them to perform and market it out there so that people know who they are. Is that what I'm hearing that correctly, I guess is what I'm saying.
Definitely. I mean, an artist manager relationship, trust is such a thing. And that's not to say that there aren't moments where there's disagreement, and ultimately, I mean, the manager artist relationship, you ideally want to, you're not going to see eye to eye all the time, but if most of the
Right.
time you guys are traveling down the same road together and you see it, then that's great. But there are going to be times where you sort of disagree. But if after a while there's just constant disagreement, then it's probably not the right relationship. And that's not to say in the 14 years I've been with Trampled, we've seen eye to eye all the time. But overall, I think they trust me on my advice. And I trust them on their art, and what they do there. So we're just, and there's probably times where either side might sort of not see what the other side is doing, and ultimately the band, I work for the band. The band is, I might believe one thing, and ultimately if the band just don't want to do it for a reason, it's up to me to work around that. I just have to
Sure.
deal with what they want to do. So I just put my best foot forward and what I think is the best advice. And usually we 95% of the time, maybe even 99% of the time, we see eye to eye. So it's been good. I always kind of joke with them. I will take Trampled by Turtles problems at their worst over 99% of any other artist problems. So I've had such a good run with these guys, and I'm really grateful for it. So
Yeah, that's awesome.
awesome.
Christian, I've got a few questions left for you here before I let you go.
Sure.
So, just I guess last question around achievements and goals and things that you're doing as the manager. What would you say in your 14 years is your proudest achievement?
I don't know if there's one particular moment that I'm proudest about, but overall, especially like, with it being the 20th anniversary this year, the fact that we've made it this long, and the fact that like we're about to embark on opening for a guy called Zach Bryan, who's, you know, really successful right now, sold out arena tour. He's just a massive fan of the band. So he invited the band to come along. So the fact that like 20 years in, we're seeing the influence of the band on this younger generation of artists who are, I mean, just frankly, just bigger than us, but they're seeing, they're sort of like tipping their hat to what Trampled meant to them. being a part of something like that is just really, really special to me, and there's a lot of other younger bands that Trampled has been an influence on. Camp is one of those bands. Drawing a blank on some other ones, but seeing that, the influence that Trampled subtly had over the years, that's really special. And it's really special to be a part of something like that. And it's also really special, I get tons of emails of people just telling their stories of like, the music of Trampled, they walked down the aisle to that. It was my dad's favorite band and he passed away. It's our little kid's favorite, just all these stories of just the happy times, the sad times. Like you just see just how much the band's music moves people. And that's just something that's bigger than all of us. And that's the most special thing to me. But there's not really like one event that really comes to mind that it's like, oh, hell yeah,
Still getting goosebumps. I think that's awesome, that specialness, like it, you
Absolutely,
can
man. I
feel
mean,
it.
I've seen these guys so many times now, and I still get emotional at shows, and especially some bigger ones, and even ones that you would never think it. Like Grand Rapids, Michigan, 2022 is one of my favorite shows I've ever seen of the guys, and almost as magical as some of like the Red Rock shows. So it's like it's. I love that I get to see these guys, and especially as we've been doing it for so long, I just see just how like just special when the six of those guys get on stage, just like what a thing it is and just how uniquely Trampled it is, you know what I mean? And just to be a part of that, it's like it moves me every time I see them. And I just, that's probably my most like just the proudest thing that I get to be involved in that.
Sure. Yeah. I love that phrase, uniquely trampled. I'm gonna use that, I think, in the future. And hold on to that Red Rocks thought, because I have my final question is around your upcoming Red Rock show. A couple quick hitters here. Do you have a favorite band song?
A favorite Trampled song?
Yes.
This is a tough one, but I think a song that just makes me really happy every time I hear it is a song called Annihilate from Life is Good on the Open Road in 2018. That song just brings me joy every time. On record, live, thankfully they play it a lot, so I get to hear it often, and that's a song that I love.
Yeah, I do love that song too. Whiskey's a really fun one for me. It's hard. I know they didn't write this song, but their cover is so good, and it was the wedding song for my wife and I, "Wildflowers."
Oh yeah.
That cover just knocks me off my feet every single time I hear it. So that one's really hard for me to say. Like, I know they didn't write it, but they're really good at performing it.
That was a really special song too, because Trampled kind of took a break in what was it, 2017, and guys were just kind of just taking some family time, just doing some other sort of stuff, and it was when Tom Petty passed away where
Yeah.
they all were like, guys, like let's go for a little retreat. Let's do like a band retreat in the weekend, or for the weekend, and go into a cabin in the woods. And I think we might have even done just like a impromptu sort of like Facebook live stream, and they might have played that song. But then soon after they recorded that song. But that was kind of, Tom Petty sadly passing was kind of what, you know, kind of in a sense just got the band back together, and
Wow.
The power of music sort of just like brought them back there, and here we are.
Wow. That's a great story. I'm glad I brought that up. That's really cool to hear. Um, all right. Second to last question. Favorite tour spot that you've ever, any band, I guess, but if you want to stick with Trample, but favorite venue that a band has performed at that you hooked them up with?
I mean, Red Rocks never gets old. There's an anxiety that I still sort of get, and maybe like an imposter syndrome, like every time I sort of walk into that place, and thankfully we get to do it every year, and it's just like it just you're just humbled, and it's just the magic of it never gets old. When you're lucky enough to sort of just loiter around there during the day for sound check, when they kick everybody out, and it's just, the band and the crew and you just in this empty amphitheater, and you're like, oh, just how special that is. But then once all the people get in there and the energy of the show, and those shows always just wind up being so special. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been to a show there, but it's every band knows, like every band just knows they're in a special place. The audience knows they're in a special place, and everybody collectively just brings it. And those are shows that never get old, and it's just, lucky that we get to do that every year. The Ryman Auditorium is also just a really wonderful magic place. Just all the history of a room like that,
Sure.
that's a wonderful place too. First Avenue in Minneapolis, that's just the legend of that place, and especially just working with a Minnesota band, just the history and all those amazing artists that walked on that stage. That's always really special there too. So yeah, there's lots.
Well, I'm glad to hear that Red Rocks is so high on your list because Ethan, who I mentioned, our other best friend Matt, and I, and a few others, we're all actually going to the Red Rock show in July.
Oh, hell yeah.
And yeah, so I was. My last question was just going to be, what advice would you have for us to enjoy that experience as much as possible?
You got your friends. You got whatever. You're going to see a band that you love. You don't really need anything else. Check the weather that day. It might rain, but like you're just add band and you're fine. You got your friends in the band. You're good to go. So that place just makes memories for everyone. You see it on people's faces. You see it on the photos that everyone's sharing after, and people keep coming back too. Like it's a little sort of pilgrimage that people kind of make, which is a beautiful thing. It's a special, special night. So yeah, you're gonna have a great time.
Oh, I'm thrilled. I'm excited. Can't wait for it. It's what, like three-ish months at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
July 13th. Hell yeah.
Yeah, so coming up quick, but Christian, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for taking the time talking to us about your career and the band and everything. I'm rooting so hard for all of you, and it'll definitely be. This is my first time getting to see the band in a few years. Matt and Ethan get to see them a little bit more. It's harder with two kids, but definitely excited to get to see them again, and you're just. Really can't thank you enough for this. It was really special for me, and I hope you enjoyed it too.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for having me. Thanks for listening and supporting all these years, and we'll see you down the road.